He's just turning us on. So. We're good. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jessica Westgard-Larson. This is Scott Pryor, and we're leading Adult Forum this morning just to kind of give an update on the foundation. We haven't done that in a few years, mostly blame COVID. Otherwise, we've usually tried to have somebody from the foundation talk to the congregation at least every couple of years to just let you know that we exist, that we do have a foundation that grants money to a lot of different organizations, and scholarships for students of the congregation, and a lot of different things that we do. So we'll kind of take you through. We prepared a bit of an agenda. We don't know how long this will take. You might get to go home early, but that we'll start by kind of talking about the different funds that we have that we supervise. We have a few different specialty funds that we work with. We'll let you know some of the projects we've done the last few years. I went back to 2018. I didn't look at when we last talked to the congregation, but I thought, well, we'll do the last 3-4 years kind of quickly. And then we're here to, of course, talk about how the board itself works and answer any questions that anybody might have. And yeah, we'll kind of take it from there. So where did you want to, I can't remember how we discussed. We talked about this, but it's been, through email over a couple days. What parts did you want to cover?
Yeah, I mean, I think I wanted to just talk about this. And
sure.
For me, I think this was important when I first started on the board for the foundation, of just trying to figure out, like, when we're making decisions about what we're going to give money to, what do we base those decisions on? Is it just like anything that we think that sounds good? But we actually do have, as any good organization does, bylaws that very specifically lay out the criteria of what we are supposed to give money towards. And it's specifically new ministries in the church. And I think we've all come to sort of a realization as we've done different rounds of funding, that we do have to pay attention to what is in the bylaws. And so we're always trying to make sure that the funding requests that we can fund are new requests for new ministry that should be outside of the normal operating expenses of the church.
And other organizations. We're
Sure.
also sensitive when we get outside requests that it's like, okay, are they just requesting money because they didn't get enough other donations for whatever this year, or we're more likely to honor the request if it's because they're trying to do something new or enhance their ministry somehow. It's not even just St. John's Ministries, but to do something kind of unique and extra and outside the norm versus us being a resource for their standard operating budgets. So and we've actually considered in the last few years trying to do some revisions to our bylaws to try to make things clearer, because everybody who comes on seems to kind of get stuck in like, how do we interpret this? But the farther into it we get, the more we've all kind of come to the realization that sometimes being a little bit vague is okay, because it allows the people who happen to be serving at that time to come up with their own interpretation of how they want to view it. So I put on the slide, and just in case it's hard for those online to read it, the official purpose from our bylaws is the purpose of the foundation shall be to enhance the ministry of the church by establishing new ministries and stewardship opportunities, additional and apart from the general operation of the congregation. So that's really, and we have kind of taken that even to some of the outside organizations where it's like, yeah, of course they love to just come to us for money. And it's like, well, we're not part of your normal budget. We'd like to be there for the extra special things. So, and you'll see that when we start talking about the things that we do.
Could I just make a comment in that regard?
Yeah.
For several years, the foundation supported the ELCA World Hunger,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden that ended.
Mm-hmm.
What, they don't love me anymore?
Yeah.
But then I had to go back, even though I had served on the foundation for 2 years. But I mean, that's the guideline.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so for those of you that are online, maybe didn't hear what Woody said, Woody made a comment about how the foundation for many years had supported the ELCA World Hunger Relief. And that's a wonderful thing to do, but at least I think when the current board members, when we were sort of looking at what we're supposed to do, in looking at what we are supposed to do, it didn't fall into the category of new ministries. Mm-hmm. And so as much as we would love to support that, it didn't seem like that was the purpose of the St. John Foundation. And although we would be open to changing that, that's not our job.
Right.
If the congregation does wish to change the bylaws to expand what we can put our money towards, that's great.
Yep.
But our job is to allocate funds based on the bylaws that we do have.
Right, right. So, and I just put on at this point that currently, and this was another thing that's interesting in the bylaws, we actually have in our bylaws where we can have a perpetual fund, which is endowed, and a memorial fund, which is not endowed. But as it stands right now, all of the money that we actually oversee is endowed. So everything that we have, we're only allowed to spend the income, and there's different restrictions that I'll get into on each of the funds, but it's income only that we can disperse. But our bylaws actually allow us to manage non-endowed funds as a memorial fund, but currently the memorial funds are actually managed by the church, not the foundation. So there's a little, we'll kind of get into that later. So, okay, which way do I go? That way, there we go. So like I said, the Perpetual Fund, and I'll kind of go through each of the main funds that we work with right now. We call it the Perpetual. It is officially the St. John Foundation Fund. This is kind of our largest piece of money. And we're allowed to use the dividend income from the investments on this fund for disbursement at each of our quarterly board meetings, or frankly, anytime we have a request that we find that we need to fulfill. This can be distributed for projects within St. John as well as external entities. And the application's on St. John's website. That's one of the good things we're excited that we've done the last couple of years is we've digitized pretty much everything we do. And the application forms are now online, which also makes it really easy for some of those outside entities to find us, which has made things interesting. We've had a few international requests that may or may not be scams. We've kind of had, we haven't granted any of them, but we've had an individual in Africa who has found us and has tried to get us to fund his education a couple of times. And provides lots of references, but we're not even sure that the references are valid. So anyway, that's made things interesting. And from the Perpetual Fund, we typically have about and again, it's dividend income, so it's going to change, but we have about $8,000 to $10,000 a year that we can disperse. So, which is a nice sum of money, and at the same time, it means that we feel really bad when we get a grant request for $15,000 for something, and it's like, we don't have that much a year to disperse. But it's also part of why we're talking to you guys today, is just in case anybody wants to help add to those.
And that Perpetual Fund, that's really, I think for most new projects, that's the one that has the most flexibility, the one that we end up having most discussions over.
Yeah. Most of the requests we get are from that account. The next one that we have is, and it's very similar but just slightly different, it's the North Dakota Tax Credit Fund. So every March, we can take 3 to 5% of the year-end balance of that fund and transfer it to our checking account, and then we can disperse from that throughout the year, just like the Perpetual Fund. So once we make the election of how much to move from the endowed or from the North Dakota Tax Credit Fund every year, it basically goes into the same bucket as everything else. Sometimes if we haven't had many requests and we have plenty of money in our checking account, we'll leave this one for a meeting or two, just because it makes a little more interest and growth in that place. So we don't actually move it until we need it, which always makes meetings fun to have to be like, okay, reviewing that whole, Robert's Rules of Order and having to maintain your minutes and reread the prior minutes. That's always like, have we done this yet? Just to make sure we stay on top of the years that we have and we haven't. So the income from that currently usually gives us about $1,500 to $2,400 a year. And, the board has discretion on the 3 to 5% range. Last couple of years, when investments have done beautifully, we've usually been on the high end of that at about 5%, but if we have some lean years, we can always choose to spend less. And the biggest thing on this one is North Dakota residents who donate at least $5,000 to a particular North Dakota domiciled endowment in a tax year can receive a North Dakota income tax credit of up to 40% of their contribution to a maximum credit of $10,000 as an individual or $20,000 married filing jointly. And we do have a family in the parish who have given to this most years, so that this fund has typically grown, or actually this one, or there's another one that's similar. So this is one that we definitely just want to make sure people are aware of, especially if you're a North Dakota resident and feel like doing any year-end gifts, that this is definitely a nice tax credit for those who can use that in the state of North Dakota. But definitely, of course, talk to your tax advisor to figure out if you qualify for this or if it's something that would be good for you. But it is otherwise, it's used to fulfill the same general obligation gifts as the rest of the foundation. It just has to be managed separately to qualify for that tax credit.
And you have to give the money to not just St. John Foundation, because that would go to the Perpetual Fund. You actually have to specify that it's going to this
North Dakota tax credit. Yep. And we actually have two North Dakota tax credit funds, and this next one, the Nissan Preschool Scholarship Fund, is also a North Dakota tax credit fund, which I hate to say, I think this is my 6th year on the board, and I only connected the dots on that last year. So, anyway, so we also, this one was started by Aaron and Holly Nissen just back in 2012, and it's, like I said, it's also a North Dakota tax credit fund. And every September, the same rules, we can distribute 3 to 5%. But here, we choose the amount to distribute from this fund, and it goes directly to the preschool. And then Jana in the preschool determines which families qualify for the scholarship, and then she chooses how to divide the funds between the preschool families that could benefit from having a scholarship to have their kids in school. But yes, this one's also a North Dakota tax credit fund. I think you can give to it outside the tax credit too, though. I guess I'm not sure. Nobody's tried. It's only been a few people who've given to that one. But yeah, the preschool definitely appreciates that. One of the other specialty funds that's been around the longest is the Aselson Scholarship Fund. This was started by Bruce Aselson when his wife passed away many years ago. And I was going to ask Rachel to clarify, and I forgot when her mom passed away. But this is not a North Dakota tax credit fund, but it is also open to donations if anybody wants to continue growing it. It provides scholarships to St. John youth who attend an ELCA college, but not seminary. We've had a couple of questions on that come up over the years. The dividend income from this is available to be distributed every June, and the students need to apply for the scholarship via an application that's also on the website, and then the available funds are divided evenly between the applying students. So a couple of years ago, we had like 3 or 4 kids going to ELCA colleges. They didn't get very much. Right now, there's only one. Getting a gold mine, so we kind of chuckle every year that it sort of seems unfair that, the kids who have lots of classmates from Sunday school that all choose ELCA schools end up watering down each other's scholarship, but it's the way it was set up, it's the way it works. And then our newest one, and this is the one that we feel bad that we've not really had much of an opportunity to tell the congregation about. When Bee Eilenfeld passed away, she had a bequest in her will to donate money to the foundation, specifically, and she asked that it be used for music and scholarships. And so this was just started in 2018 with her bequest. Took us a little while to kind of get the details sorted out, work with her family, get the account set up, do all that kind of stuff. So we really didn't have it ready to roll till right when the pandemic hit. So at this point, we do finally have the application on the website. It can be used for scholarships or music-related ministry. Her stipulations were very vague, so that's a little bit of a challenge for us that we even went back to the family and said, do you know what she was trying to do here? And they said, nope, this is all we've got, have fun. But we did decide as a board, just because it makes sense, that we will not use this money for ELCA scholarships, but it will be eligible for seminary students, just so we're not conflicting with the Aselson Scholarship Fund. And so far, there haven't been any distributions yet, so we feel kind of bad about that because it's mostly a marketing thing. We haven't told people that it exists. So that's part of why we're here today. We've just a little bit of a delay in advertising on that one. So we definitely want to let people know that it's out there, especially, and with scholarships, super vague. So if there's kids going to camps next summer, if the music ministries area needs anything, we've got this additional fund that's available.
I don't recall, if someone applies for the Perpetual Fund, which is the normal fund that we use, but it maybe is or could be appropriate for this fund,
we might choose.
We could just sort of transfer the information into that.
I think we could. Or contact them and let them know that we'd like to switch to using that fund instead. So, question, Don?
Yeah, because I did know her, and with the music ministry. So if someone wanted to get a music degree in college, so is that the kind, or just maybe just take music lessons? That's the kind of thing.
I think so. We have no guidance.
Yeah,
So if
yeah,
it sounds
'cause she
good
was
and
so,
makes sense.
yeah.
I mean, if anything, I think those of us who've been around here for a long time who know that the church has a special music fund and that we have these other scholarship funds, part of us kind of wondered if it ended up in the right place, but it was designated to the foundation. So we had to create a new fund and do it this way. But yeah, at this point, give it a try. And, Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so things that we've given to in the last few years. 2018, we did, you want to hit any of these? Or you want me to plow through them?
Go
Okay.
for it.
So Eastern North Dakota ELCA wanted to start a new United Against Hunger event, so we helped support that. We covered some chaperone expenses for the ELCA youth gathering. And that's one that, you know, we do sort of sometimes struggle with because there's a certain part of like, well, that happens frequently, and it's not necessarily a new thing. And at the same time, I don't think we'd had kids go to the youth gathering for a while, if I remember right, or something. It was a few years ago, I'd have to think back to it. We helped support Eric Hawley's Eagle Scout project. We helped provide some scholarships to summer campers that went to camp that summer. The Emergency Food Pantry asked for help purchasing a new TV for their lobby to do some marketing and other information updates via a lobby television. Pathways, Inc. requested help purchasing a van for their Lutheran Outdoor Ministries staff. And then this was about the time that we lost our prior team doing the faith chests, and those were at risk of disappearing. And so there was a request for the foundation to help purchase equipment to have members of the congregation continue making those faith chests, to not lose that program. And then also there was a parenting book study for St. John, and we helped purchase the books for that new program that the church was going to offer. Yeah, Woody?
The first one that is listed up there, Eastern North Dakota ELCA, New United Against Hunger event.
Yeah.
This is just the year.
Thank you. Eastern North Dakota ELCA, New United Against Hunger event. I don't resonate to that.
I'd have to go back and look again. This was 4 years ago, so I don't remember all of the details, but
I don't remember either. I'm not even certain if
Yeah.
I was on at the time.
I could find you the information if you wanted to look at what it was and when it happened, and just 4 years ago, I don't
curious,
remember all the
because
details.
I don't know what that is.
It was an event that they were,
A one-time event?
it wasn't, I don't think they had hoped it would be, but again, this was in 2018 and things changed, you
Yeah,
know, unexpectedly in a lot of
yeah.
different ways. So I can go back and find you the request if you want to see more information on what it was and when it was. It was just long enough ago now that I don't remember the details.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, again,
Were you even on the board then?
I can't remember if I was or not.
Yeah.
But, I think I was, and I think I do recall that there was some discussion of, like, it was something new. It was like the World Hunger Appeal, of course, had been going on for a long time, but there was something new that they were trying to help encourage people to participate.
Yep.
I'm thinking maybe we had an emphasis about that time for water wells in our companion synod, the Central African Republic. And maybe that's what it was for.
Yeah, I can find you, we have all of the information on our cloud drive. I can pull it up for you when we're done here. I just don't remember it off the top of my head.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So in 2019, MSUM Crossroads Campus Ministry wanted to start trying to entice more people to come to their program by offering meals at their services. And so they asked us to help support them providing meals to the people that participated in their worship services and other events. Churches United for the Homeless. This was actually, so every now and then this also happens where we have a meeting and we have no requests. And sometimes we hold on to the money so we have a little extra when we do have requests. And other times we kind of look around the community and we brainstorm a little bit. And I want to say in 2019, Churches United had come in and spoken to the congregation at an adult forum and talked about some of the struggles that they were having. And we kind of came up with, as a foundation board, to say that we wanted to help them by providing some funding to have additional programs for kids that were in their program over the summer, or that were living at Churches United over the summer. So we gave them some money with the request that it be used. I think they did some like Y Camp scholarships. There might have been some like bus passes to go to different activities around town, you know, but they didn't approach us for that one. We actually went to them and said, you know, we hear that you guys are really struggling with how to help these kids feel normal when they're living in a homeless shelter over the summer. And so we offered that to them. And then St. John Lutheran Church, I think that was a year that we had kids that were going on a camping trip, and they approached us to purchase sustainable utensils to take along on the camping trip, so they weren't using plastic forks and all that kind of stuff on their trip. That was the start of the LED light project around the church, of replacing all of our old light fixtures. So we received the initial request and started funding that. And then the preschool and the church wanted to go together to create a laundry room downstairs in order for the preschool primarily, but also they wanted to have laundry available at the church in case we ever have people, youth groups staying here or something like that. So we helped support that. And then we also had students going to Red Willow Bible Camp, and we provided some scholarships for that. So, yeah.
Just in regard to the LED light project, I just want to express appreciation
Oh, yeah.
from our committee, Care for Creation, because we have replaced about 500 of those 4-foot
Yep.
long tubes,
Yeah.
and they cost about $8.05 each. This was a tremendous help.
Good.
for
Happy to do it.
providing that. So
Yep.
I just want to say thank you so much
You bet.
for making that possible.
You
Yeah.
bet.
I think those are the kind of projects that we really love to fund. Of course, we're happy to fund projects outside the church, but when there are kind of lay-led committee groups within the church that have an idea of something new that they want to do, like that's
Yep.
what really this is made for. So that's perfect.
Well, and I remember one of my first meetings when we were kind of hashing through the bylaws and our purpose and everything, we spent a lot of time talking about big C versus small c, about the church. And, the fact that it talks about ministries of the church. Well, it's more than just St. John. So every year we and we have no defined line. It's kind of wherever requests come in or whatever makes sense as far as how much money do we send outside of St. John versus what do we use to support things that need to happen here. And like the LED light project, how would you ever put that in the budget? I mean, that's just something that, it's hard to have that kind of a building upgrade be something that goes into the budget that we use our annual, gifts from the members of the congregation, but it's going to save us so much money in the long run, as well as be greener and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we were very happy to help support that, especially having people in the church that were willing to tackle the project and do it less expensive than if we had to hire electricians to come in and do the whole thing, so.
Yeah, I think there are probably some facility upgrades or like repair
Yeah.
that maybe is a grayer or harder to fund through the St. John Foundation.
Right.
But that, I think especially given that it was coming from the Care for Creation Committee, thinking about it from a sustainability perspective.
Right.
I think that helped
Yep.
put it over the edge pretty easily.
And then we had another request from the emergency food pantry that they had, and I don't remember what the equipment repairs were, we'd have to look back at that, but then they also wanted to upgrade the vehicle that they use for doing deliveries around town, so we helped support that. And 2020. So 2020, not much was happening anywhere. And so the pandemic started March 13th, and I think we had our first meeting in June, and we didn't have any requests. So again, we sat around the table and said, okay, the world is shut down and crazy right now, what should we be doing? And earlier that year, Matthew's Voice had come in and talked to the adult forum, and so we thought, okay, homeless high school kids in town, what are they doing right now? How do they distance learn? What are they eating? How is that working out? So we made the decision to do a gift. I think we gave $2,000. It was a pretty decent sum to Matthew's Voice project to help with that. Sorry.
And then there was plenty of other things related to the pandemic specifically, and so there were some equipment needs for the church to respond to, like, now we need to start streaming things, and so we were able to help with that.
People should know that what we're doing now is basically pretty much because of the foundation. Screens,
Laptops, streaming devices.
the laptop, the cameras,
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so the screens, the laptops, the tablets, mics, cameras, all that stuff was pretty much enabled through foundation
Most of us had been at
requests.
home watching cell phone worship, and when the request came in for additional upgrades, it was like, oh yes, we need to do, this needs to be done, and yeah, they'd either have to find another private donor, or yes, this is something that's definitely a new ministry to this church that we can get on board with. That year, we also, and I don't remember if they reached out to us or if we did the grant to them, I'd have to look back, but we also, again, supported Churches United with some children's activities for that year. I'd have to look back at when we did that one. And then Heart and Soul Community Cafe, I actually know the director of that nonprofit that's really still kind of getting their wheels off the ground, but they're doing some good things. And they wanted to repair their vehicle, and they needed to do a vehicle upgrade because they just purchased a food truck. We kind of put together the basics of this. When we get time at the end, if there's a few of these organizations that you're less familiar with, I did slides on 4 of them, just to tell you a little bit more, if we've got some time at the end. And then 2021, we didn't pay for the whole thing, but we did help support the Screens project. And then some additional streaming devices were needed. We had a request for that. It was kind of minor. And then we helped provide the church with a meeting owl. This was actually right before
Pastor Brian.
right before Pastor Brian left. But it's a device, and I've seen it used a little bit. Have you guys been picking it up? Okay. It's basically a camera and microphone that picks up a broader area. So if you're holding a meeting and you're doing it also as a remote meeting, it's a better experience for people on both sides. To be able to put a screen in the room of all the people who are watching remotely, as well as instead of just having one camera on one person, it allows you to record everybody who's in the room for the meeting and broadcast it to everybody else. So that was another, kind of like, ooh, how long will these remote meetings be going on, device to help make that kind of thing work better. The next one we struggled with, but I think it was like $100. It was $110 or something. But the faith chests, that team came back to us and asked for some money because they were operating a little bit in the red. Some of the equipment that they'd purchased was a little more than they'd planned on. There were a few other ways they were kind of short, and we really debated and struggled over that one because it was not a new ministry, and we already gave them some money, and it's like, hey, you went over, it's not our problem. And at the same time, it was like $112 or something, pretty minuscule like that. And then we went, okay, if we say no, then they're going to personally pony it up, and we didn't have any other requests at the time. So again, kind of that fuzzy zone on new ministries that we try to stick with it, and yet sometimes it's like, okay, we'll get them back where they need to be operating. Churches United contacted us. They were redoing all of their offices to have key fobs. They'd been having some security issues with some staff turnover and not wanting to have to pay for rekeying all the time, so we definitely supported that update. Additional funding in 2021. So when we had the LED light project, they asked us for a pretty good sum of money, and we were happy to help support the project, but we've also, no offense, seen things happen at churches where somebody asks for a whole bunch of money because they're going to do this thing, and then they do like 10% of it and it disappears, and then they've got all this money. And that doesn't make sense. And so we actually, I think we took thirds of what they asked for, and we issued a third, said, when you get that much done, let us know. We'll happily write another check. And so, it kind of came through in 3 different thirds. So the request was done in 2020, but we continued funding it with some of our money into 2021. And then MSUM campus, Crossroads Campus Ministries, they asked for some support for a book study that they wanted to start and for bringing in some speakers. This one also, and actually this was I think at our last meeting, so we haven't necessarily come back. They were also interested in partnering with our church to some extent on some of the speakers they wanted to bring in, potentially sharing. So if they were bringing somebody into town to talk to their people and it was somebody that we could have lead an adult forum or do a similar event at the church, they were interested in partnering on that. So we helped support what they were looking for financially, but then kind of referred them back to the church for the other part of it.
And am I remembering right that was related to support of LGBTQ
I think it was, yeah.
people within the church?
Yep. So, and then the Aselson Scholarship Fund, this is just kind of fun. So from 2018 to 2021, I pulled a list of kids who got money from this fund. Some, are still new in school, some are done and gone, but those are the kids of the church that benefited from that. So then we'll get a little bit into more kind of what we look like. Our board, so there are 5 of us? I think there's 5 of us. We have 3-year terms, and we can serve up to 2-year terms. So our current board members, me, I got suckered into being president like my 2nd year in, and nobody else wants to take it. I'm on my second term, and I have 1 more year left on that. James Botnan has been our treasurer for a number of years now. His second term is going to expire at the end of this year. Heidi Tweet has been our secretary for a few years now. Her 2nd term is expiring at the end of this year. Scott's on his 2nd term, but he serves through 2023. And then Rachel Aselson is still in her 1st term, and when that position was coming open, we sort of said, our treasurer is almost done with his term, and having to have signers on checking accounts and somebody working with the investment manager and all of that one's kind of a big job. So we intentionally found somebody that was willing to come on the board knowing that they had a year or so to learn how to be treasurer, and we planned for Rachel to be our treasurer when James's term expires. So she already knows that. She's making sure to pay attention to that kind of thing. We internally appoint our board positions every January. So again, other than the fact that like changing signers at the bank is a real pain in the butt, we try not to change that one very often. The other ones we can always shuffle around as needed, but nobody ever wants to be president, so I'm kind of stuck. Let's see, the pastors of the church are non-voting advisory members of our board, and the church council nominating committee nominates our board members, and then the congregation votes on them in the annual meeting in January. So we do have 2 positions opening at the end of this year, so hopefully the nominating committee is working on that, and you're welcome to throw your name in the hat. So new technologies, this is something that we've really worked on the last few years. When I came on the board, we were handed a binder that went all the way back to 2002 with every single letter that was ever sent to anybody, request, all that kind of documentation. And so we now have scanned all that in, and we're operating digitally, something that we started back in about 2018. We have a Google Drive that holds all of our historical documents that we have. Honestly, nobody seems to know where anything prior to 2002 is. Woody, if you have any idea of who's, okay. The foundation, I think, was started in 95, is the date our bylaws were signed, but there's a few years that seem to be missing in there.
I joined the congregation in 2009. So
Okay. Yep. The applications are also now Google Forms, and there are links on stjohnfargo.com. And we also now have a board email address. So I listed that here, but I also say, some of us have a lot of email addresses to check, and this one doesn't get checked very often. So I make a point to check it before we have meetings, but if you send us something to that email address and you don't hear back for a month or so, it's in there. It doesn't get any junk mail. It's almost my favorite email address, but we don't check it super often. So, but we do make a point to look at it before our meetings.
I think all of those Google Forms for the applications, I think for most folks, it makes it a lot easier to apply. You can go to the website, you can see what the purpose of each of the funds is, and then you can fill it out online instead of doing it on paper and getting it to church and then distributing it. There may be people who are not as comfortable with that, so if
it's a problem, let us know.
Well, I'm sure we can help people through a phone call, fill it in for them if needed.
But it also worked well, because for example, in 2020, when we needed to do, or during the pandemic, when we needed to do the Aselson Fund distributions, and we hadn't heard from any of the kids that were going to ELC schools, because of course nobody was going to church, nobody thought about it, it sort of got overlooked. And so we actually pulled up the prior year kids who got it. I called Aaron and said, who graduated last year? Like, is there anybody new? And we actually reached out to all the families, and it was super easy for the kids to go get the form, fill it out that day. Because it was like, oh, the meeting's tonight, we haven't gotten any grants. Oh, shoot. Well, we should make sure that they know this is here, and we didn't want anybody to get missed. You know, especially when we figure out the amount, divide it by the number of kids who applied. If you miss, like, we already promised everybody else what they're gonna get. So that year, it was good that we were digital and able to reach out to people really quickly and get the applications in so nobody got overlooked. So a few other things. So our investments continue to be held in a brokerage account at Alaris Financial. Just kind of as an aside, we started at Alaris, and I don't know if it was way back when, but Keith Burke used to manage the investments at Alaris. Keith has since left Alaris and gone to Bell Bank. We actually chose to stay at Alaris for a lot of other convenience reasons and things like that. We have been working towards some updates to our bylaws to try to enhance some clarity, but that kind of got stalled out a bit by the pandemic, and council just having a lot of other things to worry about. And at this time, I mentioned this earlier, only the church's endowed funds are under the management of the foundation. We've had some discussion about potentially moving some of the non-endowed memorial funds just for the foundation to manage the distributions, but that hasn't happened yet. Then my last kind of official slide is some action items for you. So of course, donations are welcome to any of the funds at any time. Know that the gifts are endowed and will live on forever. We're only allowed to use the income. If you do make a bequest to the foundation through your will or estate, we would love it if you would confidentially talk to the board, just to make sure we understand the details of what it is that you're trying to do before something happens, so that we can make sure that we're honoring your requests when somebody does pass away. As an aside to that also, it's exciting that, I look at some of the grants that we did for campers, youth gatherings, some of that kind of stuff. It is nice that we'll have a new scholarship fund to take some of that money and not have to use the general foundation money, to have a little bit better clarity on how some of that should work. So I'm glad that we have what B set up. But as this goes forward into the future, I don't think the foundation is super excited about having new designated funds every time somebody dies. So if we can try to keep some of these things in the other funds that already exist, that would be wonderful, versus having to set up a new name designated fund every time something happens. And let's see, St. John members, just a reminder, everybody is welcome to apply for funds, either on behalf of A Need of St. John, a nonprofit that you like and would like to see us support. You're welcome to refer us to nonprofits that you might have passion about that are around the country. It's not even just local. It's just coincidence that right now it's been some local things. And then remember to encourage any St. John youth you know that are going to ELCA schools to apply for some scholarships. And then we've got 2 openings coming up, so consider serving on the foundation board at some point in time.
I think that for church staff as well, it's important to recognize that whenever there's a new thing, like if you got an idea about something you want to try, this is what we're here for. I think it probably is important to think about, is it a sustainable endeavor?
Right.
Because we could help for a year or maybe 2, but
At some point, it's going to have to go in the budget if it's going to require
yeah,
some ongoing support.
But Pastor Eric, you were mentioning this door hanger thing in the neighborhood. I assume that there's a fair amount of cost associated with that. That seems like a perfect thing that the St. John
There's also an
Foundation
advertising
could-
budget, but anyway.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it's a new
Right, it's a new.
new effort beyond the scope of what we typically do.
Yep. Any questions that anybody has based on what we've kind of talked about, or? Yeah, Woody?
Knowing what you have done for LED lights and so forth, Care for Creation, one of the projects we've talked about is possibly putting solar panels on our roof. I
Okay.
just, a week ago or so, read about a congregation in Minneapolis that got some help, and I forget exactly what it was, but I think it was $15,000 or $20,000 that enabled them. I mean, we estimated maybe putting about 40 panels,
Okay.
and maybe as an inducement to people, having a solar panel built as a demonstration, say located near our church entrance or something, to just
Okay,
eh,
put
just
the idea
tell
together.
people. And so that's maybe something that we might well request money for.
Sure.
Yeah.
Think it through and pull some numbers and a plan, and we're happy to take a look. So, otherwise, you can continue asking questions if you want. I did just pull a few things, and I apologize, this is microscopic. I went to their website, and I knew it was going to go on the screens, and I did my best. But so Crossroads Campus Ministries at MSUM, I did think it was kind of nice when I went back to just find a few things, if you weren't familiar with them, that they did actually put in their newsletter, which was nice to see, that St. John's Foundation provided a grant to explore difficult topics of faith. Through those conversations, LGBTQ+ students heard the truth that they are beloved children of God and learned that there is a community of faith for them on campus. So they gave us direct credit for that, which was outstanding. And then the other picture I just included was a group shot that they had of students participating that was in their newsletter. And I was getting them confused with another group. But anyway, it was nice that they gave us that credit for having helped with that program. Another one, Pathways, Inc. We don't necessarily know by name, but this is actually Camp Emmaus and Camp Minnewacan. And so I think this was a van that they needed for some other ministries that they were also doing outside of their normal summer camp programs. So Pathways mission offers unique environments where God encounters people and renews them to live lives of love. And I'd have to go back and look at my other slide, but I think they were doing outside, and this was pre-pandemic, that they were doing some other outdoor ministries like around Fargo-Moorhead outside of their Camp Emmaus and Camp Minnewacan ministries. So they were trying to start some new things in that regard.
It used to be Pathways was 3 sites near, Monaga, 3
Okay.
miles east there. And then you mentioned the one up near Bemidji, and then there was one way up north on the Boundary Waters. But just
Yeah, that's the,
long-standing sites, and but hopefully the Pathways is trying to install new programs.
yeah, and they were basically looking at doing other, not necessarily on-site camp-based programs
Yeah.
around the community. So, Heart and Soul Community Cafe, like I mentioned, this is, and if you're not familiar with them, I mean, the best thing I can say is, especially if you're on, Facebook and social media, follow the community cafe and social media. Pre-pandemic, they were basically doing a pop-up restaurant, and it's a pay-as-you-can. So you pay for your meal, if you're able to pay for your meal, and they're hoping that some people pay extra, and it allows others to come in and eat for free. And so that's kind of the concept behind the community cafe. Of course, with the pandemic, restaurants, indoor spaces, whatever, really making things challenging for them. During the pandemic, they put together a lot of meal kits that they made available. I don't remember what the sites were or how they handled that distribution, but they also did do a lot of free meal kits available for people in the community who needed them. And then during that time, they also secured a food truck, and now they're doing more of a food truck situation of the same concept, pay what you can. If you can pay full price, that's wonderful, but anybody who comes will be fed. And so, kind of operating under the premise that they're trying to feed those who can't in an environment that isn't necessarily a shelter, but it's more feeling like they can go to a restaurant and have a meal even if they can't afford to pay full price. This one we kind of connected to. Admittedly, Lola Dahl, the executive director, played bells for me when I directed at Nativity years ago. So I've known her for years, and I've watched her go from this being a dream, that she had been to a community cafe in another state when she was on vacation at one point. She thought it was just the coolest concept in the world, and she's had this dream for Fargo-Moorhead for probably 10 years, and it's finally coming together. So it's been kind of fun to see her work through that. And sometime I've been meaning to ask her. She'd be happy to help tell their story of what they're doing, more directly to let St. John members know what they're doing in Fargo-Moorhead. But again, pandemic and them having to sort of change the way that they're doing things has affected it. But I've also seen other churches around town that have been, inviting their food truck to come out for lunch and supporting having the food truck as a lunch option at the church, with members welcome to come and stop by and support it in that way. And then the last one, I know we're a little bit more familiar with, but it's been a couple of years. I didn't know if there'd be new people here, so I just mentioned Matthew's Voice. They have come in and talked to our congregation separately, but this is the organization that provides additional services for I think the number one thing that they were doing was senior portraits for homeless high school students, so that they had the ability to feel special and needed and be ready to, just feel that sense of normalcy. But they've also provided other supports, clothing, needed items. They basically have an in with the network of homeless high school kids, and a lot of them are independent of family, have reasons that they're not in the foster care system. There's a lot of them are living on the streets on their own. So Matthew's Voice is a group that supports that. So like I said earlier, especially in the early days of the pandemic, we really felt that was a place that probably could have used some extra money to support those kids at that time. And that's all I had prepared. Any other questions or things we can talk about?
Do you happen to know, is Matthew named after a particular individual, or is it a reference to the Gospel of Matthew?
I think it was a reference to the gospel.
Yeah.
Because I think if you look, the page that I pulled doesn't necessarily have that quote. But I think they had a verse that they reference in their mission that was from Matthew.
Could well be Matthew 25. I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty. I was in
Could be.
prison, and so forth. Yeah.
Yep, could be. I know they talked about that when they came here, but I don't remember what it was.
And we'll be publishing a Christmas wish list type thing where you can adopt a family that they have on Facebook, hopefully next week. Because they're one of our ministry partners for our capital family.
Okay,
So we're trying to figure out how we can
yep.
trade.
And I guess I didn't put it in here, but our next meeting is next Monday, the 13th. So if you do have any requests, and usually our deadline is like 4 o'clock the day before. If we get it the same day, we'll probably honor it. It just means that we have to punt a little bit to make sure we all have read and been versed a little bit on what's being asked for. But we do have we meet quarterly. It's typically December, March, September, and June, July. June, sorry. The end of the quarter. So our December meeting's coming up.
Jessica or Scott, were you approached by someone that encouraged you to become a part of the foundation?
Mm-hmm.
And what expression have you found in terms of what this foundation does in terms of the whole life of St. John Lutheran?
Say that last part one more time.
Yeah. How has your serving on the foundation board, has it enriched your understanding of what this congregation is about, or?
Definitely. I mean, to see the things that are happening in our church and have the ability to help support some of the new stuff that's happening without having to write the check myself is always kind of nice. But it's also fun to see, you know, some of the outside community partners that come to us for assistance, to see the kind of the fire and enthusiasm of other board members, especially when we've had, you know, quarters where we don't have any formal requests, and then we sit around and brainstorm a little bit. Is there anybody we should be helping, or should we just bank the money for next time? And sometimes the creative ideas that we've come up with as a board has been fun to see. And yeah, I mean, it's been a pleasure to serve. It's been, and you know, and I have a background in finance, but that has nothing to do with it. I actually can't do any of the things that I do on the board. It would be a conflict of interest. And yet the board is very much made up of average everyday people that are members of St. John who simply want to give an hour and a half every quarter to helping do this, you know. Okay, we put a little more time in than that. We joke. I was roped in. It's only an hour every quarter. It's a really low commitment.
But giving out money is a fun job to have.
It's kind of fun to give away other people's money, yeah. You know, especially for things like this. So, and it's always been a nice group. Of course, that's going to change, but it's been a good way to get to know
The group will change. It will still be nice.
Right. Yeah, we hope. Yeah. So,
When Levon and I joined the congregation in 2009, one of the big things that drew us here was the fact that we sensed that, and a lot of this was talking with Roy Hammerling, that St. John was not focused inward, but was more focused outward. And to me, that's more the understanding of what the small C and the large C in church, in terms of what this ministry, what this outreach,
yeah.
the
Well, and
possibilities.
the type A analytical person in me came in and was like, well, but what percentage do we do internal versus external? And having to like navigate the whole, oh my God, I have to play that by ear is a little bit tricky sometimes to feel like, and there are, you know, and even like the Matthew's Voice Project and a few of those things that we've done the last couple of years, part of it was, okay, we've had a lot of requests from inside the church, and the church needed it, you know, here at St. John. We needed to help support some of that technology growth, you know, the things that had to happen to keep the church sustained through everything that was going on. But meanwhile, when we've had extra money, that's why it was like, well, you know, who can we do something for external? Because we still want to make sure that we're supporting that side of it at the same time with whatever we can. So, but it is always more fun when we actually get requests and don't have to necessarily go to the drawing boards ourselves. We do feel bad when we walk away and, you know, outside of the scholarships that happen automatically at certain meetings, you know, when we've had other meetings where we haven't otherwise given anything away, you kind of feel bad. And at the same time, it's not all bad because it means we've banked some money, so if we get a bigger request next time, we're more likely to be able to make a bigger impact. But you still feel bad when nobody asked for anything. Doesn't anybody want anything?
We haven't had too many meetings.
And it's been getting better. My first year on the board, this was probably 5 years ago, we had like 1 or 2 requests all year. You know, it was very, very thin, and then you kind of feel bad, like, what are we doing here? And, you know, I remember one of those years, it was one of the major hurricanes. I know we gave to ELCA disaster relief because we kind of felt like, well, we got to give something to somebody, and, you know, that made the most sense at the time. So, yeah. Do you want us to recap in like 10 minutes? No, I'm kidding. Lots of people have trickled in, and that's great. So.
That's real helpful. I know
Good. And that's what we were shooting for.
Yeah, just wanted to, again, remind everyone that we exist and what the process is to make those requests.
Yep.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more opportunity to do things that I'm not always thinking about. So hopefully we can move this into the front of people's minds, and they can kind of think creatively about some new things that we can do in the church.
Pastor Eric, haven't you said there are 4 levels or 4 areas that at least you like to have us as a congregation think about?
Yeah, I mean, they're focused on the in-church and then kind of the local stuff, which I think is great. I mean, we have, I think, what you do with World Hunger and some of the other things we're doing, we did with regional and international pieces. So
So, all right, well, thanks for letting us
Thank you.
present. We'll see you again in a couple of years.